To get started on this exercise, we're going to be illustrating and animating an Illustrator logo. You needed to have downloaded the Illustrator logo folder, and inside of the footage folder is an Illustrator vector file that we're going to import into After Effects. Now, one thing to note, in the book, this exercise is going to begin by creating a new composition and having you play around with the different shapes and layer effects that you can do with vector shapes. Essentially, we're not going to turn in this first part where you're playing around with the shapes layer. Instead, we're going to create our new composition, and then we're going to jump over to page 132 to begin animating the logo. So to get started, we're going to launch After Effects and create a new composition. The size of this composition is going to be a preset size of HDV with a 29.97 frames per second. The duration of it needs to be 5 seconds long with a background color of black. We'll say OK, and this will be the starting point for our composition. To import our image, let's go to File, down to Import, choose our file. Inside of the footage folder is the Illustrator file, and we're going to import this as a composition that retains its layer sizes. With this done, we'll say Open. Notice that this gives you an Ivadi logo composition as well as a folder with all of the sublayers inside of it. Now, since we're wanting to animate the logo and we already have a composition created, let's double-click on this composition icon to open it up inside of After Effects so that we can edit all of the sublayers that are inside of this composition. Let's animate the little person first. Choose the Logo Person layer, type the S key to open its scale, and hold down Shift and type the R key to open its rotation. We're going to move our current time indicator to the 15th frame, so right about here. We'll set the scale all the way down to 0, and let's click the stopwatches to add 2 keyframes at this 15-second mark. Now we can move our current time indicator to 1 second and 15 frames. There it is right there. We can set our scale back up to 100%, and let's have it rotate around just once. So we'll set that as 1 rotation. If we scrub back, you can see how it's going to spin and come up. With that done, we can also select all of our keyframes. I'm going to hit F9 to add easy easing. We'll do the same thing for the circle. We'll close out the logo person, select the circle. We're going to scale it up by pressing the S, put our current time indicator right at 15 frames, click the Scale tool, set its value to be 0 so it scales it all the way down. This time, when it scales up, we're going to go to the 25th keyframe, right about here, and we're going to have it scale up and overshoot how far it needs to go. So at this point, let's set our scale to be 140%, larger than it needs to be. Then we can move back to the 1 second mark, right here, and then we can set our scale back down to be 100%. Selecting all of the keyframes again, hit F9 to add easy easing, and let's test our animation. So it comes up and then back down. Now, despite its compatibility between Illustrator and After Effects, After Effects still has to rasterize these images. If we were to zoom in, you can see the little jagged edges that are around this particular logo. It's especially apparent if you have to scale something up beyond 100%, as you see it's here. So to tell After Effects to continuously reevaluate and re-rasterize every time it's animated, we need to go down to our layer panel. We're going to do this just for the circle layer, and you may have to press your toggle and switches mode until you can see this set of options. This second option, the one with the little starburst, tells After Effects to continuously rasterize your animation. Now when it plays, it'll keep it as a nice high quality rendering rather than losing quality if it goes beyond 100%. With this done, I'm going to zoom back out so I can see the whole thing. The last thing we want to animate is the word innovati. So since it's already in its final resting place, let's move our current time indicator to 2 seconds. I'm going to go to our logo type layer, press the S key to bring up the scale, and press the P key to get the position, and the T key to bring up its opacity. And let's click on the stopwatch to add keyframes to both of those. Next, we can bring our current time indicator back to 1 second, and we're going to have the position of it go down just slightly and set the opacity down to 0. This way it'll come up and fade into view. Finally, we can close out this layer, and let's bring our current time indicator back to 0 seconds. From here, we're going to be adding some new shape layers from scratch. You could use your regular shape layer tools to draw off whatever shape that you want. Another way you can create shape layers, by not having any of the layers selected, you can go to Layer, down to New, and choose Shape Layer. There it is. Notice that this will add a new shape layer, but when you twirl it open, it has no contents and no properties to it. We're going to add our own shapes to this layer. So clicking the Add arrow, in our case we're going to add an ellipse. This will add an ellipse path 1 property. We can open up these properties, and let's set the ellipse size to be 200 by 200. You'll see that your ellipse has by default no fill and no stroke. It's just a vector path. To add a path to it, let's click on the Add a Stroke. This will add a stroke path to it. We can set our stroke path for stroke number 1. With the color swatch, we can click on it. Let's dial in a specific RGB value of 140, 140, and 140. We'll say OK to this. This will make it nice and gray, and so that we can see it, let's set the stroke width to be 0.0. Now, we want to be able to make several copies of this particular circle or ellipse. A quick and easy way to do this, rather than to draw off a new one, is to go to the Add, and this time we're going to add a repeater. The repeater property down at the very bottom adds a number of copies directly to your design, and whatever you do to one design will automatically repeat or copy it over. In our case, we've got our repeater set to by default 3, and so we've got 3 different copies on our screen. Let's change our number of copies to 6. Finally, let's change the placement, the scale, and even the rotation of where these are at. Going down to the repeater properties, open up the transform for repeater 1, and here's where we can dial this in. We're going to set the position value to be 0, 0. This will stack them all on top of each other. In order to see it, we're going to scale them down by 80%. Now we can see it inside of there. And we're also going to rotate this by just 90 degrees. So make sure it's 0x 90. By default, you won't be able to see that until we actually start to change up the line starting and stopping point. The best part about these transformations is that they can be animated as well. Let's take our current time indicator and move it to frame number 15. We're going to click the Scale stopwatch to add a scale keyframe, and then move our current time indicator to 25 frames, frame number 25, there it is there. And we're going to scale up our scale to 100%. As we've done with the others, let's select both of those and press F9 to add some easy ease. Now, you can see how it animates and scales up nicely to fill the entire screen. With this done, I'm going to close down my repeater options and even my stroke options. Let's add one more option to here is the trim paths. The trim paths option gives you the ability to add a starting and stopping point to your line. I'm going to zoom in so we can see this just a little bit better. There we go. With this done, let's take our trim path 1 and open it up. Let's set our current time indicator to frame number 5, which is right here. And we'll set our ending value to be at 0. So with that, there we go, set to 0. With that started, we'll click the stopwatch next to your ending value. Then let's move our current time indicator to frame number 20 and set our ending value to be 100%. As you can see, as I scrub through, this will create the little concentric circles all inside of that area. If I was to play it, this is what it looks like. With that done, let's also add some easy easing to those as well. Now we can back up. Let's view our animation. So far, so good. Now we don't want these concentric circles to stay on there forever. We want them to stop being visible at frame 25. So I'm going to move my current time indicator to frame number 25 right here. Then hold down the Option or the Alt key if you're on a Windows computer and press the close bracket key. This will automatically trim to that 25th frame. Now when we press play, especially when we have everything deselected, looks beautiful. Let's rename our shape layer by selecting it and pressing Return, Concentric Circles. We can close it up now, and let's place it below the circle that we have here. Actually, let's put it below the logo type layer too. Finally, let's add another shape layer that'll do a little orange accent. We'll bring our current time indicator back to the starting position. We'll go up to Layer, and let's make a new shape layer. This will add it to the top. We can then open up our shape layer, and in our case, we're going to add another ellipse. This will create ellipse path 1. Inside of ellipse path 1, we're going to add a stroke to it. From here, we can open up stroke 1. Let's set the color of it to be orange. So with that fill color selected, we can set an R value of 255, a G value of 145, and a 0 blue value. We'll say OK to it. We'll increase the width of this one to be 8 pixels wide. Under the ellipse path 1 part, let's move our current time indicator to 15 frames. We'll click the size stopwatch, and we'll set the size of it initially to be at 0, scaling it all the way down. Let's move our current time indicator to 1 second. Whoops, excuse me, which is right here. And then we're going to set the ellipse path 1, setting the size of it now to be 1,500, which will scale it off the screen. So now when it plays, it bursts out completely. As with the others, let's select both of those and add easy easing to those keyframes. Backing it up, may take a moment to render. Now it plays really, really nicely. With this done, we can collapse down the layers. Let's rename shape layer 1 by clicking the return key. We'll call this the orange accent circle. And we'll drag this orange accent circle, oops, excuse me, just below, make sure to select it, the concentric circle. The last thing that we need to do is to make a pre-composition of our overall logo so that it all can move up just slightly. To do this, let's choose our logo person, hold down Shift and choose logo type to select all 3 of those layers. Go up to Layer and choose Pre-Compose. In our case, we're going to call this our logo animation. Make sure that Move All Attributes to a New Composition is selected, and we'll say OK to this. This will group everything together into one pre-composition layer. With this done, let's move it and animate it into position. So with all of those selected, let's put our current time indicator at 1 second here. We'll press the P key to open the position, and let's click the stopwatch to add a keyframe. We can then move our current time indicator to 4 seconds so that it slowly moves up. And then we can change the logo's position by typing in 640 by 325. This will move it up just slightly. Now when it's played, it'll animate and move up the entire thing just slightly from there. Everything looks great. With our Innovati logo composition selected, let's go to File, down to Export, and let's render our composition. Make sure it's set to best settings, output to, choose the layer or the folder that you've been working on, and make sure to add your name to the file. When you press render, this will create a movie file that I want you to upload to the Canvas page in addition to the After Effects file that we just saved.